Hello again, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Fantasy Slant, powered by Pro Football Focus. I'm your usual host, Michael Moore, along with our usual co-hosts, Mike Tagliere and Scott Barrett. We are going to be breaking down all of Sunday's Week 5 action. Let's just jump right in, boys. Steelers, Jets. Steelers win 31-13. Le'Veon Bell, 66 yards rushing, but 9 receptions for 88 yards receiving. Scott, it seems like, there's not a lot of analysis here. Le'Veon Bell's really good.
Yeah, I mean, we knew he wasn't going to do much from the ground. He was up against one of our top 6 graded teams in run defense. But he got 11 targets, 9 receptions, 88 yards through the air. He has 72 routes run over the last 2 weeks, which is just 4 less than Antonio Brown. If you have him on your team, you should be super excited. He's probably my top running back going forward, and he might be my top overall player going forward.
Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, the silver lining with him being suspended was he's fresh, for missing 3 weeks. He's well ahead of everyone else. But anyway, Mike, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I wanted to chime in just because, my bold prediction, the one that we did for PFF, one of my bold predictions was that Le'Veon Bell would actually lead the NFL in fantasy points at the running back position despite missing the first 3 games. And, to right now, that's holding true. Last year, he was number 2 behind Spencer Ware in yards after contact with 3.4. This year, he's already sitting at 4.1 yards after contact. His 11 targets were more than, I think, all but 4 wide receivers. So they're going to use him in one way or another. It was kind of ridiculous what he did today. But the real story that I want to hit on before we move to the next game is Sammy Coates. I know a lot of people are looking at it like Sammy Coates had a great game, but he didn't. He really didn't at all. He saw 11 targets. He caught 6 of them. It was for 138 yards, 2 touchdowns, right? That's fantastic. We gave him a negative grade. This is what happens when you actually watch the games. I watched that whole game. Sammy Coates dropped 5 passes in that game, guys. That's like Brandon LaFell territory from last year. He dropped more passes in this game than any team did this week. Sammy Coates was not good. He should have had a much bigger day. But I think that's like when people talk about oh, he's so good. You need to watch the games. And Sammy Coates, regardless of what the stats say, he didn't have a good game.
That's pretty impressive, though, Mike. I'm not saying it's a positive impressive, but that's pretty impressive for drop. And yeah, I watched that game too. And did you see that one he had literally at the goal line with no one around? And did you see that, Scott? It was a lob. It wasn't even thrown that hard. It was a lob, and he was at the goal line, and he had it in his hands. And I don't know if he was just starting to think of what dance he was going to do when he scored or what, but it was it was really bad. It was really bad. It wasn't just he threw it too hard. It was no, he really that was bad.
All I have to say is my player comp for him last year was that he plays like an ostrich. I'm not even sure what that means, but just terrible hands. He kind of sticks his head in the dirt at times, but he can run well. I don't know. Not a fantasy.
Well, and that just may be a case of, hey, he's the right guy in the right place, but if you put him on any other team in any other situation, he would not do nearly as well fantasy-wise.
Yeah, I agree. And both Scott and I, we talked about Sammy Coates this morning, saying we liked him, especially as a GPP play this week. We talked about it on our morning show today, but just know that he wasn't very good. Just understand that. And if you can sell him for, I don't think he hangs around starting very long if he keeps dropping passes like that. I think Marcus Wheaton will pass him again in short order, even though Wheaton's not good himself. But it was just a messy game. The one, more if you watched it, then you would have seen the one play. He was down the sideline, and he jumped for a ball that he didn't have to jump for, and it went right through his hands. He adjusted well to the ball in the air, but then it just literally right through his hand. It was crazy.
Right. He's trying just a tad too hard, but that's okay. He gets an A for effort. So, all right. Well, let's talk about the quarterback throwing him all of these passes. Ben Roethlisberger had 4 more touchdowns today. Now leads the league with 15 touchdown passes. Mike, I'll ask this of you. Is he, quarterback 1 material? Not just quarterback 1, hey, he's a starter, but the quarterback 1 material.
No, he's definitely not. He's not very good in road games. We saw what he did in week 1 against Washington on national TV, and that was more of an outlier of what he's done over the last 3 years. He averages so much more fantasy points at home. You kind of saw he didn't throw a single touchdown. The Steelers scored 3 points at Philadelphia just 2 weeks ago. So you don't overlook into one game. Roethlisberger is known to do this. I actually do, like in the offseason, I work on a bunch of stats that I track booms and busts, and Ben Roethlisberger busts more than Jay Cutler does, according to my standards. And that's usually like about 14 fantasy points for a quarterback. In almost half of his games, he's basically not hitting that. So don't think that Ben Roethlisberger is all of a sudden the QB1. He's definitely going to be a guy that you're going to start at home. But when he's on the road in a not fantastic matchup, no. So, no. I mean, this week against the Jets had allowed every starting quarterback at least 7.2 yards per attempt. This game, I think he threw for 8.1 yards per attempt. Yeah, the matchup was golden here. And it was kind of a shame he didn't turn it on until later, too, because Antonio Brown didn't kind of get going until towards the end of the game.
Yeah. All right, so other side of the ball, we had Matt Forte, again with a not a great game. He's now got 3 straight games of 15 carries or less after having 30 and 22 respectively his first 2 games. Scott, I think this is a clear case of coming back down to earth for Matt Forte, right?
Yeah, we talked about it a few weeks ago. He kind of had an unsustainable workload for a running back at his advanced age. It really looks like that's right. Over the past 3 weeks, he's had 47 touches. Bilal Powell has had 30 touches. So it's much more of a committee than it was in the first 2 weeks of the season. He also didn't really get too much of a workload anyway, or neither of the running backs really did. The Steelers really didn't pull away until the fourth quarter, and Forte had just 12 carries and 2 targets. Meanwhile, Powell had 4 carries and 8 targets. So I think that's how it's going to be going forward. Matt Forte's value in PPR leagues is limited as long as Bilal Powell is active.
Yeah. I think if you can get anything for Matt Forte at this point, you probably should explore that. All right, moving on to the next game. Also 31-13, the Vikings beat the Texans. The Vikings defense, again, completely shut down the Texans offense. But on the running game, Mike, let's go to you first. So, we've all talked about how Jerick McKinnon is, the truth and the light, and he's the future. But Matt Asiata technically had the better game today. So should we expect this kind of back and forth all season without Adrian Peterson?
I liked how you called him Matt Asiata.
Either way,
I'm gonna start.
We talked about pronunciations offline.
I'm gonna start calling him that because it's annoying what he is to this team. He's always been there. He's like the John Kuhn of the Vikings, but a little bit more involved. It seems like he's always going to get those first and goal situations when they're inside the 5-yard line. Jerick McKinnon, I was a little worried about today. They were missing, obviously, Matt Khalil. He's out for the year. They were missing their right tackle in this game, too. So I was a little worried, but without J.J. Watt there, Houston's defense has been nothing to, write home about. So this might have been more of like a garbage time thing for me because the Vikings were up really, really early in this game, and they kind of wrote it out. So McKinnon didn't get the touches that I think he would have got had this been a close game or a competitive one, but this might have been just one I'm not going to read too much into just because it was a blowout. So,
okay. On the passing game, Houston's pass defense was pretty good going in, but Bradford had 270 yards on 2 touchdowns. Scott, I mean, the Vikings are probably one of the more surprising 5-0 teams in recent memory. So, where is this a case of Bradford just being better than the Texans' defense? Did they just lay down? Like, how do we account for his, fairly solid game today?
No, the Texans kind of have a decent secondary, and Bradford did all of this with Stephon Diggs out. That's really impressive, and he's played really well. If you're watching the tape, he's played lights out. Really the best football I've ever seen from Sam Bradford, and it's not even close. I think we do have to take it somewhat seriously, but no, he is going to play fairly conservative going forward.
Okay. One more thing on this game, Mike, Lamar Miller, not a good game. But what I thought was interesting was going into this week, he was only, 18th or 20th best fantasy running back, whether it was PPR or standard. So I guess my question is, at what point do we have to start, wondering if Lamar Miller is ever going to, truly break out this season?
I'm not too worried about Lamar Miller. In fact, I'm pretty sure once I sit down and go through my research this week, he's probably going to be in my fantasy stock market of buy low. There were already people like kind of getting off the wagon with him coming into this week. Some people were talking about trade targets, and I was surprised by some of the names that I saw that were associated with his name, just because the volume's there. When you're talking about a running back, touchdowns are like the most unpredictable thing. So don't sit here and try and say this guy's going to score this many touchdowns. He's going to score. Don't do that. Unless you're talking about LeGarrette Blount, when he'll score touchdowns in the Patriots offense, but don't chase touchdowns, chase volume. And Lamar Miller has seen plenty of it. I'm actually extremely happy what the Texans did this game. They realized that they were out of it. They gave Lamar Miller essentially a bye week. I think he ended this week with 8 carries. And Alfred Blue, I think, had 6. So they kind of gave Lamar Miller the week off when they realized they were getting blown out. And that's good because he was seeing a lot of work. They needed to tone it down a little bit, but the touches are going to be there. This is a 20-plus touch running back every single week. The touchdowns will follow. Not every week you're going to be playing against the Vikings in Minnesota. So fantastic buy low. Guys, if you own Lamar Miller, do not sell him. Do not do that. Like, that's the worst time to do that. If anything, I'm buying.
Okay. All right, let's move on to Redskins-Ravens. The Redskins squeaked by 16-10. The first thing I wanted to talk about, Scott, Joe Flacco, again with a ton of pass attempts, but not very efficient. So what do we make of that? I mean, is it his receivers not getting open? Is it Joe Flacco himself? I mean, what do we do with it?
We do have to remember that Steve Smith left this game early with an injury, and he was on his way to what looked like a pretty big day. So I'm going to blame it on that for now. Although, I mean, Flacco's not really the QB1 a lot of us thought he would be heading into the season.
Okay. Well, his running back did okay, Mike. 95 yards for Terrence West on 11 carries. So, I mean, obviously it was an ideal matchup. So, maybe we shouldn't expect this every week. But, Terrence West has strung together a couple of good games. I think, in this day and age of very little bell cows left out there, I mean, Terrence West is an intriguing option, right?
He really was. And the more I looked into this game, I was on the fact that you should sell Terrence West. And I still lean a little bit towards selling because I do believe this gets more and more crowded as Kenneth Dixon gets more and more healthy. But this week I liked him a lot. Washington, I looked at it. They allowed, I think it was the second most touches per game to opposing running backs. It was over 30 per game. So I figured even if Kenneth Dixon steals 8 touches this game, there's going to be plenty of work for West. Now, that didn't really happen. He's 11 carries, two catches. I think there's a reason that Baltimore lost this game. They did not play to the strengths. They didn't play to the weaknesses of the Redskins. The Redskins haven't been able to stop the run at all. Terrence West, he averaged 8.6 yards per carry. 6.4 of them were after contact. So he was running fantastic. They should have had him even more involved. He turned out to be a decent play, but man, it was frustrating, especially as someone who recommended him in cash games. I mean, it turned out that he was fine, but the game should have been so much bigger. It's just, I thought it was funny, Scott, when you started talking, you're like, we have to remember, I thought you were going to say that it's still Joe Flacco, because it is still Joe Flacco. And, whenever anybody asks me in a matchup, if they're like, should I start Flacco? Should I start this guy? I never feel confident in starting Joe Flacco. And, in this dream matchup, even where Josh Norman missed some snaps, I know Steve Smith got hurt, and that definitely affects a game plan. But Kamar Aiken's not a bum. So I don't know. If there's anything to take away, it's that Joe Flacco is extremely unreliable.
So not elite.
No, he's definitely not elite, and he's never been.
All right. One more note on this game, Scott. Matt Jones, not a great game, obviously, but, I mean, he's had a couple good games leading up to this. I mean, definitely sort of put to rest that whole, hey, his yards per carry sucked last year. But today, I mean, is this the real Matt Jones that isn't going to do well, or was it just a case of playing a tough run defense?
So it was kind of a tough run defense, but they were without their starting nose tackle, so maybe not as tough as it typically has been. Matt Jones is a guy we talked about last week who I know me and Tags both were really down on heading into the season, and he's graded out highly by PFF, at least prior to this week. I never liked Matt Jones to begin with, so I'm just going to stick with that analysis for now.
Okay. Very good. You're not biased. You're just sticking original. That's good. Okay, let's move on. Titans and Dolphins. The Titans win big, 30-17. I don't know. Let's get the bad news out of the way first. Ryan Tannehill, 191 yards, 2 interceptions, no touchdowns. Mike, is this rock bottom for Ryan Tannehill, or can we go any lower?
I'm just glad that Brandon is not on this show with us, because Brandon, I think, is out celebrating somewhere because she is like the anti-Ryan Tannehill.
Probably. She's probably getting hammered right now.
She probably is. This was a pathetic game for Ryan Tannehill. The matchup, we didn't think it was like the best matchup ever, but it should have been one where you could have relied on him for, 250 yards, 2 touchdowns. He didn't even get that. The weird part for me about the whole thing was Jarvis Landry, 3 targets. 3 targets against
don't ask me, Mike. Ask Ryan Tannehill. What are you asking me for?
I don't know. I mean, obviously the ball control was a huge issue. I haven't seen the time of possession in this game, but I would venture to think it was probably somewhere close to 40-20, because Tannehill, he didn't even get to 20 attempts, I don't think, but it was pathetic. Jay Ajayi played better than I think people would have expected him to in his role against a actually tough Tennessee front seven that they've been stopping the run decent so far, but this secondary is nothing that you should run from. But this was more of a ball control, and the fact that Miami couldn't stop DeMarco Murray. Do you know he broke 13 tackles today running the ball? There are only 4 running backs who have broken more tackles than that running the ball all year. DeMarco Murray was fantastic today.
Well, yeah, that's a good segue, because he has been acting like fantasy's #1 running back, right, Scott? I mean, it's pretty impressive, because I think a lot of us wrote him off before the season thinking, oh, he'll get supplanted by Derrick Henry, in no time. But no, he's like awesome, and he's probably carrying a lot of fantasy teams up to this point.
Not only is he the top fantasy running back, but heading into the week, he was the top fantasy running back by 16 PPR points. If you own him, you have to be freaking out. He had 27 carries, 6 targets this week. Yeah, he's a rare bell cow in a league where there's not too many of them anymore. I just wanted to say on Ryan Tannehill, so if you had a quarterback completing 66% of his attempts at 10.6 yards per attempt, wouldn't you say that's really freaking good? That's exactly what Ryan Tannehill did this week. And it goes to show you, I wanted to target this Titans secondary all season. Parrish Cox is terrible. Jason McCourty's been better, but he struggled a lot last season. But they're so good at ball control and limiting the opposing passers' number of attempts that really it's hard to play your wide receivers and quarterbacks against them. And I think that's what we're going to have to look at going forward. They're like the new Dallas Cowboys, fitting with DeMarco Murray. But yeah, they're not a great matchup to play against.
Well, so in sort of a bizarro world, so the opposite of Ryan Tannehill was, in fact, Marcus Mariota. Low yards per attempt, only 5.6, but 163 yards, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions, and perhaps more importantly, 60 yards on the ground and 1 more touchdown. So, Mike, I mean, look, we were sort of waiting for that Mariota breakout game. Obviously, this was a great matchup to do that, but, is this the start of something, for Mariota the rest of the season, or was this going to be a blip?
I try and take notes while I watch the games, and I haven't watched this whole game yet. I need to go back and watch it. But from what I did see, I can tell you that the play calling changed this week. They ran a lot more option with Mariota, which is something that I don't know why was never involved back. I remember when Mariota came, and it was week 1 of last year, and Bishop Sankey, my guy Bishop Sankey, was in the lineup, and they ran the option. Sankey had a fantastic game. Mariota was doing great. And then as the year went on, he got hurt, so I thought that might have had something to do with why they weren't running so much option. And this year they hadn't been. They'd been using Mariota as almost like a pocket passer, throwing to Rashard Matthews and Tajay Sharp, who's a disappointment on so many levels. He was our third or fourth lowest graded receiver today. He had a fantastic matchup. But bottom line here is that if they run more option, with the fact that DeMarco Murray and Derrick Henry are running the ball the way they are, it opens up a whole new threat that you have to account for. It's going to help everybody involved. They needed to do it more often. So I'm going to go back and watch and see how often they did it. From what I've seen, they were doing it a lot more. And it's definitely something that could help Mariota in the long run.
Okay. All right, let's move on to Colts and Bears. The Colts win 29-23. Scott, I'll just say the name Cameron Meredith and let you go.
Yay.
So if you asked me this 2 weeks ago, my answer would have been, who?
And you weren't alone, Scott. It would have been everyone else's response too. So.
Yeah, I think what we really need to talk about here is how Hoyer is playing lights out fantastic without really many receiving options. Over the past 3 games, he has 1,029 yards, 6 touchdowns, and 0 interceptions. He's one of our 3 highest graded passers, and that's with Alshon Jeffrey, whose usage has been really concerning. Beat writers are saying he's hurt. He has had 2 tough cornerback matchups against Darius Slay last week and Vontae Davis this week. Still hyper efficient. He ranks 7th in yards per target as of about an hour ago. Not sure if that might change with some of the games still to come. But yeah, I mean, Cameron Meredith was easily this team's wide receiver 1. They're not targeting Alshon as much as you want. I think Jeffrey is obviously the far better player, but his health is a concern. Royal and Miller are fine options, but I'd much rather have Meredith than Royal. We kind of know who Royal is. And yeah, so give me the guy whose name I've never heard. He's probably has more upside than Royal.
Mike, we've got, we've talked about Jordan Howard for a couple weeks now. I mean, he's sort of proving what we have thought he might be, which is a great bell cow option in that offense. How likely it is that he can keep this up? I mean, he's had a couple of good matchups, so that's sort of helped.
Yeah.
He plays Jacksonville next week, so a good matchup for him. But, I mean, can people take him seriously? Because he's putting up RB1 numbers the last couple of weeks.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I said it after last week's game that John Fox doesn't typically like rookies. He doesn't play them too often. But after last week's game, he came out and said that Jordan Howard played fantastic, that he basically earned the right going forward, and they were going to ride him like a workhorse. They showed that in this game. Kadeem Carey played, I think I can count how many snaps he played on one hand.
2. It was
Jordan
2.
Howard.
You can.
Yeah, Jordan Howard was fantastic. I'm being a Bears fan. I watch things closely, and he's running better than any Bears running back I've seen in a long time. Matt Forte is a great receiver out of the backfield, but he was never a big, a dominant running back, actually running the football. Jordan Howard's doing that. I know Scott tweeted out something about basically Jeremy Langford and comparing him to Jordan Howard running the ball in their career highs, but I even added onto that saying that Matt Forte in his final 31 games as a Chicago Bear, he didn't have back-to-back 100-yard rushing games. That's what Jordan Howard's done over the last couple of weeks. He has earned this starting job. And even when Jeremy Langford comes back, I'm going to venture out and say that Jordan Howard's going to get 80% of the touches. I don't even think it's 60-40. So I think it's 80-20. I think that's how great he's been playing. It's not just in the running game too. It's in the receiving game as well. He looks so good out there. It's a huge story. Cameron Meredith, he looked the part today. But Alshon Jeffrey in the second half, he saw 5 targets. So I don't know if it was just part of the game plan to get Meredith the targets, because he saw 12 targets in the game. So I mean, there's a lot to be said about this Bears team, but as you mentioned more, it was against bad teams, so we have to take it as it is. But Jordan Howard looks fantastic.
Yeah. Another guy that looked fantastic today, T.Y. Hilton, 10 receptions, 171 yards, and a touchdown, far surpassing anyone else on the Colts as far as targets go. Scott, I mean, you're going to have these blow-up weeks with Hilton, but, I mean, you have to – it's a must start. I mean, he's a wide receiver 1 each week, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I was super excited about his prospects going into the week. He's had double-digit targets in every week so far. He was up against Tracy Porter and an undrafted rookie free agent in the slot who was one of our worst-rated corners last week. So I really think it was no surprise he went off this week. And with all the injuries to that wide receiver core, I really like his prospects going forward for sure.
Well, and the interesting thing to me, you guys, is, there was a lot of talk about Philip Dorsett, how he was going to see a big bump when Moncrief went out, but we haven't seen that yet. I mean, all those targets that were supposedly supposed to go to Moncrief have sort of been redistributed to everyone else, and then T.Y. Hilton just keeps getting his. So that's the interesting thing is, because I was one of those that was really high on Dorsett and thought, oh, great, this is his time. But I mean, he's disappointed the last couple of weeks. So
yeah, Chester Rogers had double the targets that he did today.
Exactly. Who? So,
yeah.
All right. And then Scott, did you have something else on Alshon Jeffrey?
No, just agreed that his usage has been super concerning.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, it's definitely not wide receiver one material like we're used to with him. So, all right, let's take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll get to the rest of Week 5. All right, everyone, welcome back. Let's get to Lions and Eagles in a pretty good game. Lions win 24-23. Matthew Stafford continues to do well. He was going against an Eagles defense that was 5th in opposing pass completion percentage, but completed 78% of his passes while throwing 3 touchdowns. So, Mike, I mean, okay, Mike, you can't see it on the podcast, has a thumbs down. Okay, Mike, go. Explain to the people your visual.
Yeah, Matthew Stafford did not play very good. He didn't play awful, but he didn't play very well. Do you know? Okay, so he only threw.
Why do you hate, Mike? Why are you hating?
No, listen,
you are a Bears fan, so
okay.
I mean.
No, I know, no, but that's the thing. Stafford turned me around the first couple weeks because I was saying I wasn't a fan without Calvin, but we're talking about this game. So basically what I do for PFF, today my job is to go through all of the stats, find a lot of neat things in there that is exclusive to PFF, and then turn them in so that we could do things with them. Okay. One of the stats I came by on Matthew Stafford today, he only threw for 180 yards. Yeah, everybody can see that. But what you don't know is that only 50 of those yards came from him actually throwing the ball in the air. Only 50 yards. That's 27% of his passing yards came basically. That's the receivers and the running backs did the rest of the work. He did nothing. Of his 25 attempts, 50 yards of it came from his actual throws. Everything else was done by Theo Riddick and Golden Tate after the catch or whoever else you want to.
Why are you throwing up your arms when you say those guys?
Because yeah, it was a weird game because I know people are going to walk away and say that Matthew Stafford tore apart the Eagles. I don't necessarily think I think the game plan was good. I think that Matthew Stafford may have known Jim Schwartz, his defense, a little bit better than any other quarterback would have. But I don't know. I just don't think that Matthew Stafford had a great game in this one. I think it was just more of okay, the game plan was fine. His little short dink and dunk throws, kind of like he did against the Colts.
Okay. All right, let's talk about Ryan Matthews. Had an okay game, 42 yards rushing, but added 5 receptions, 33 yards, and a touchdown in the passing game. Scott, there was some talk of, Wendell Smallwood's going to start taking carries away, but Wendell Smallwood didn't see any action today. It was all Ryan Matthews. So I think if you're a Ryan Matthews owner, you're pretty comfortable in his standing there, right?
Yeah, it's really comforting, too, that he had more targets than Sproles in this game, which I'm sure came as a surprise to a lot of you. It's nice to see that they're using him as a receiver. And he's going to need that because this offensive line has really not been too good to him. So he has 142 yards to date, and 128 of those have come after contact. So he's really getting jammed at the line a lot. So if he does get that receiving workload going forward, that's going to be really beneficial to him.
Okay.
Your dog, I think, disagreed with that, though.
Well, he has a lot of Wendell Smallwood shares in so, he's not a fan. All right, let's move on to Patriots-Browns. Patriots 33-13. It was the return of angry Tom Brady, 406 yards, 3 touchdowns. Mike, again, I don't know anyone that did not see this coming, right?
Oh, yeah, no. Well, it's funny because, Scott, I talked about it on this morning's show about Brady, and I think that there's 2 camps. There's the one that says there's no such thing as angry Tom Brady. He's just great all the time. And then there's other ones that are like, oh, Tom's going to give it to the NFL. And I said, can we start a movement here saying that there could be a little bit of both? The fact that, people play better, under pressure. There's people that are more clutch than others. Tom Brady just happens to be more clutch than most people. Look at his Super Bowl rings. So there was definitely narrative to be played in there. Throwing for 406 yards. There were actually him and Brian Hoyer both threw for 400 yards today. That was just the first time it's happened since week 6 of last year. That was one of the neat little stats I found. But Brady, he looked fantastic. It looked like he hadn't missed a beat because he hadn't been able to be with the team for the last 4 weeks. He had to be away from them, nude sunbathing somewhere. but he came out, he looked just like the Tom Brady we remember. Part of it has to do with he was playing against a Browns team that's just god-awful. But, Tom Brady's Tom Brady, and we don't see any sharp decline anytime soon.
So actually, I don't think you should start him next week, though, because, I talked to Tom, and I'm like, are you still upset about
right? Scott Barrett, Tom Brady
suspended?
insider, right?
Yeah, are you so upset about getting suspended? He's like, no, I'm not mad anymore. That game against the Browns did it for me. So, yeah, he's not angry anymore. You can't start him.
Nope.
Like, I didn't know both of you guys worked for TMZ on the side. I thought it was just but all right. So in the receiving game, Scott, you had Marty B, 6 for 67 and 3 touchdowns. Meanwhile, Gronk had 100 yards. I mean, we talked about, could this offense support 2 tight ends, as being viable fantasy options? And obviously today they did, but, is that something people should hang their hat on going forward? They don't have a lot of receivers that they prefer. I mean, maybe Edelman, but it seems like Bennett and Gronk are, pretty much the next 2 options after that.
Yeah, I think this is pretty much how you're going to see it going forward. Edelman's going to be the top target. He's going to lead the team in targets the majority of the weeks. And then Gronkowski, I feel like, is going to be his number 2 target. And then right after that, Martellus Bennett, possibly an every week option. It depends on the league, but he's probably going to be more touchdown dependent than I think Gronk would be. I definitely like both of their prospects going forward, and it is really reassuring with Gronkowski, who's been dealing with a hamstring injury that last week was apparently super serious, and he still got over 100 yards. And Hogan's in there as well. He had over 100 yards today. I think this is I think it's going to be tough to gauge every single week. Edelman's an every week start. Gronk's an every week start. And then Hogan, Bennett might be more volatile from a week to week perspective, but still good plays.
Fun fact that I looked up. So only 2 tight ends had 3 touchdowns on the season going into this week, and then Bennett matches them in 1 week. So just another weird week in fantasy tight end land. So, hey, Scott, next time you talk to Brady, can you get us all tickets to the next Patriots game? Or
I just want to hang out with. I just want to hang out with Giselle.
Yeah, we can do that too. I mean, whatever. I mean, we're open. We're pretty flexible. So. Anyway, all right. So let's move on to the afternoon slate. Cowboys and Bengals. Cowboys double the Bengals up 28-14. Ezekiel Elliott ran wild, 134 rushing yards, 2 touchdowns, added 3 catches for 37 yards. Didn't actually touch the ball a lot, Mike. I mean, he's becoming super efficient these last couple weeks.
He really has. He really has. I can't even say too much right now about it because, coming into the week, I'm still in the position to where I'm worried a little bit about his outlook because I'm not worried about it. I need to find the right word to say when I'm talking about it because Ezekiel Elliott coming into the game had broken 5 tackles all year. So the offensive line was essentially doing all the work. But this week I just looked, he broke 3 tackles today. So it's obviously, he's getting there, but he has looked better every week. This was the week where I said it was the first one giving him an actual test against the Bengals with Burfict back, but Burfict got hurt. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure he got hurt in the first quarter and he didn't play the rest of the game, which would leave their run defense pretty wide open. So, but with them giving the ball as much as they are and him being as efficient as he is, I don't know. I think everybody knows he's an RB1 though at this point.
Yeah, I mean, and look, it's not like he's going to do what Le'Veon Bell and David Johnson do in the receiving game, so I don't think he's quite to that level. But, I mean, it's pretty much he's right behind them, I would say. I mean, he's the bell cow, and he's extremely efficient, or at least he has been the last couple weeks. So
yeah, 3 weeks in a row, over 130 yards, yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
All right, so, Scott, we've got on the other side of the ball, you've got Jeremy Hill, which I truly don't remember. Which side of the Jeremy Hill debate were you on before the season? Were you yay or nay?
I wasn't really too excited about either of them just because I don't really like committee running backs.
Okay, so Jeremy Hill proving that today with only 4 carries for 12 yards. Didn't add anything in the receiving game, 1 target. I mean, he was sort of billed as maybe a more touchdown-dependent running back too entering the season, Scott. But I don't know that he's a safe play any week now, right?
I don't know. I am kind of excited about Cincinnati's prospects going forward. I think Tyler Eifert coming back hopefully next week should kind of give a nice little boost to the entire offense. And I think if he's there, that just means more positive game script, more opportunity for Jeremy Hill. But no, Hill's not really someone I'm too excited about.
Okay.
Well, guys, Jeremy Hill was hurt. He only played 15 snaps this game. He left with they're calling it a shoulder injury. I remember, like, if you guys were watching the Thursday night game, that hit that he took on the sideline, he got up, he was mad. He was walking off the field, and I tweeted out at that time that I wouldn't be surprised if they broke his collarbone. I think something's wrong with his shoulder, and I think it happened at the beginning of that Thursday night game. And to see him only play 15 snaps in this game, and the trainer was over there looking at his shoulder, I do believe that there's actually something wrong, because even the rest of that game, Jeremy Hill didn't look the same. So him, I was shying away from this week because I was still concerned about it. And to see him play 15 snaps, it wouldn't surprise me if he misses some games here. I don't know if it's necessarily a talent thing there, but I think it's just more of like an injury taking place right now.
Yeah. All right, one more note on this game. Dak Prescott continues to impress, 18-24 for 227 and a touchdown. Not much as far as rushing yards, but did add a rushing touchdown. So, Mike, I mean, just so we can, talk about the Tony Romo, eventual debate, what does Dallas do with this? I mean, fantasy-wise, Dak's been, decent. I mean, I would not say quarterback one material, but definitely streaming option, and obviously, if you're in a 2-quarterback league option. But, I think people would like to see him sit there or stay there the rest of the season, right?
I was one to say that I don't think that there's a way he steals the job from Romo, but with how he's played, how he's not turned the ball over, it's hard to argue with it right now. If Dallas continues to win, I know they were talking about like week 8 was the target point for Romo to be back. If Dallas keeps winning the way they're winning, and this is coming from me as a Romo supporter. I think Tony Romo has been extremely underrated throughout his entire career, but I don't see a reason to go away from Dak if you're winning games consistently. Give Romo time. That's the thing. It could take time. When somebody's out with a multi-week injury, it's going to take them time to get back in the groove of things. Don't mess with Dak Prescott right now. He's playing extremely well. He's not turning the ball over, and you're winning games. That's ultimately all you want.
And look, there's just some things that Dak can do that Tony Romo couldn't do. Dak can run. I mean, that adds a whole other element to the offense there. So it's interesting, though. It's very interesting. So,
yeah.
All right, let's move on to Bills and Rams. The Bills win 30-19. Scott, I'm not going to cover Case Keenum because it's Case Keenum, but Todd Gurley, let's cover him. So he had 72 yards on 23 carries, so still not quite as efficient as we'd like him to be. Did score a touchdown, did add 3 catches for 36 yards. So where are we at on the Todd Gurley question for the season? I mean, he was drafted as a running back 1, hasn't necessarily produced like one, but again, that's not necessarily his fault. So what do we do with him the rest of the season?
Yeah, he's just playing I don't know if he's playing well. I should rephrase that. But I do know that opposing defenses are just stacking the line against him. They're not threatened at all by Case Keenum. So really, he's at a major disadvantage there. He did see 5 targets today because Benny Cunningham was out. But I would like to see more of a workload for him in the receiving game going forward. I think he's this great multi-dimensional running back, and it's kind of hurting the entire offense, especially the passing game, just using him as a pure runner. Gurley going forward, I mean, I know you took him as potentially the top running back, but I would trade him for the running back on the other sideline in a heartbeat, LaShawn McCoy. I really think when you're talking to top running backs in the game, you just mentioned Zeke with Bell and David Johnson. Also, DeMarco Murray. But definitely LaShawn McCoy, he went all out this week in like what was pretty much a tough matchup. And he had a tough matchup last week against the Patriots too. He had 18 carries for 150 yards, and then through the air, 2 targets, 8 yards.
Yeah, I mean, he's been, and it seems like we've talked about him every week the last couple of weeks as being a really good option. And if people aren't taking him seriously, they probably need to at this point. So
I track something called bell cow games, which is just any running back who plays more than 66% of the snaps, running back carries, and running back targets. And LaShawn McCoy is my only running back so far to do that in every single week.
Yeah. Well, and look, that goes back to just not having many options behind him. I know they brought in Reggie Bush because they had to cut Carlos Williams, et cetera, but there's just nothing behind LaShawn McCoy that I think entices them at all. So, Mike, real quick, obviously Sammy Watkins not playing, won't be playing for a while. Is there any options on this Buffalo team as far as receivers go that we should watch?
No, a lot of people were asking me about Robert Woods coming into this week, and I said that that's like literally a desperation option. I know he saw 18 targets the prior couple weeks, but he's generally a slot receiver, and you don't want to run your offense through somebody like that. Goodwin's going to have some weeks because he's targeted downfield, and Tyrod has an arm that can get it to him downfield, but for the most part, there's no weekly option you could actually trust here. That includes Tyrod Taylor. Like, I don't think that you could even feel comfortable starting him with LaShawn McCoy running the ball the way he is. The way they're going to win games is just handing it off, 20 times a game. So I'm with Scott. LaShawn McCoy, he's a lock. But the thing on Gurley, so his trade value is really low. I actually bought on him before this game today. I traded away Frank Gore and Matt Jones for him.
That's nothing though.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm telling people to go out and reach out to the Gurley owner that they're frustrated, that they feel like they'll take whatever they can get for him. But if you could sell high on somebody like I did with Gore and Matt Jones, it worked. I don't think you need to trade LaShawn McCoy to get him. But just reach out to the owner. I mean, Todd Gurley, he is being involved in the passing game more. He saw 10 targets the last 2 weeks. He's caught 8 of them. He broke 10 tackles today. So Todd Gurley is starting to play a little bit better. It's just we have to hope this team gets better. I don't know if Jared Cook's the answer, but, man, I can tell you that Case Keenum is not.
Hot take, Mike. Yeah. Hot take.
No.
All right, let's move on to Falcons and Broncos. The Falcons, a bit of a surprise, I would say, to some, win 23-16. Scott, this was another game where if you, for some reason, had Devontae Freeman and Tevin Coleman on your team, and you started both of them, it turned out very well, which surprisingly has happened to me a couple times personally. So Devontae Freeman, 88 yards rushing and a touchdown. He added 3 catches for 35 yards. Tevin Coleman rushed for 31 yards, but added 4 receptions for 132 yards and a touchdown. So, I think this is just a case of 2 really good running backs, right? I mean, it doesn't appear to be anything else.
Yeah, I don't know. This one's a tricky one. I do know the Falcons were heading into this game leading the league in running back fantasy points. And, I mean, they're definitely the leader by a landslide after tonight. I think my main takeaway here is if Devonta Freeman ever got hurt or if Tevin Coleman ever got hurt, that other running back might be the overall RB1 for that week.
Yeah. Well, look, I mean, Devontae Freeman was last year with Coleman out for some of the season. So I think that theory is probably correct. So Mike, I guess the question is, when should we expect these kind of blow up games for the both of them? I mean, you think the strategy this week was to attack Denver in the middle of the field. And obviously it worked with Coleman because he just, had multiple gains of 30 and 40 yards. So, is that something the Falcons can do every week?
The Falcons, what they're doing, it's going to be really, really frustrating for fantasy, and that includes Julio Jones. Last week, we saw Julio Jones dominate scoreboards every single week. But what the Falcons are doing this year, they're using that to their advantage because there's a lot of teams bracketing Julio Jones, and it's amazing kind of what Denver's done with opposing number 1 wide receivers, A.J. Green, Mike Evans, now Julio. They just bracket these guys where they don't get anything. But the thing is, the Falcons are being smart about it. If they're saying, if you're going to take away our number 1 option and devote 2 guys to him, we're going to use our running backs out of the backfield. They're going to be matched up with a linebacker instead of a safety. And that's just mismatch galore. And they're playing it perfectly. So the Falcons are a really scary team to play right now. There's only so many ways that you could stop this offense. And if we could somehow get them to get Jacob Tamme off the field and Austin Hooper onto the field, I think it could be even better. But man, it's fun to watch them. So yeah, it's going to be frustrating as an owner for sure. Scott's right though. Like if you own one of them, I really wouldn't trade because you're probably not going to get the value you would if one of them were to get hurt and the other one were to blow up, because as you saw with Devonta Freeman last year, even if you removed his touchdowns, like he would have been like, I think the number 3 fantasy running back. So there's plenty of value to be had. But I think Devonta Freeman's the more talented one in my opinion. I've stated that countless times, but it's definitely a good position to be in. Just it's not good for fantasy owners.
Well, and I think, if you, like you had mentioned, if you own either Coleman or Freeman, I mean, the Falcons just don't have other options in the passing game, besides Julio Jones. That's it. I mean, Mohamed Sanu, okay, he's a decent red zone target, I guess. And like you said, the tight end position is kind of in flux right now. There's just no one else to throw it to besides Coleman. He is sort of by default pretty high up on the priority list there. So,
yeah.
All right, on the Denver side, we had Paxton Lynch, the rookie, make his first start. I think the interesting thing for me, Scott, was Emmanuel Sanders continues to string together pretty decent games. I mean, he led the team in targets with 9, receptions with 7, yards with 80. I mean, Emmanuel Sanders, it looks like, has overtaken Demaryius Thomas as the top Denver receiver, right?
Yeah, I completely agree. I think this is the team's wide receiver 1, and they're targeting him as such. He has more targets than Demaryius Thomas in 8 of their last 8 games. That's crazy. Mike, I want to know who Trufant shadowed, or if he just stuck to his side this week.
I didn't see the whole game. It's funny because my Sunday ticket was out of, like, for the second half of games. Like, it was cutting in and out, and my wife was on the phone yelling at basically DirecTV about it. But from what I saw, it looked like Trufant was staying on the one side of the field, so he was seeing a little bit of both Demaryius and Emmanuel Sanders. But yeah, no, you talked about it this morning, Scott. So Scott was already on the fact, saying that Emmanuel Sanders was kind of the number 1 receiver in Denver with the way the targets have looked. And I think Emmanuel Sanders has outproduced Demaryius Thomas in yardage every single week this year, hasn't he?
Yeah, I think so. I also know heading into this game, he outscored Demaryius Thomas in PPR in 8 of their last 10 games together.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if you're not wise to that by now, you probably should be. So, all right, final game of the afternoon, boys. Raiders win 34-31 over the Phillip River-led Chargers. Rivers did have a good game, fantasy-wise, 359 yards, 4 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. Mike, I mean, this was kind of the shootout, I guess, people were hoping for. So, can we just hope that Phillip Rivers does this every game and they're behind most games and just chucking it all the time?
Man, I don't even know what to expect from the Chargers anymore. It seems like every week it's a new thing they're doing, whether it be running their offense through their running back, Melvin Gordon, whether it be running through Travis Benjamin, the Gazelle. We got Tyrell Williams, Dontrell Inman last week. And then this week is kind of a mix of everybody. I know Hunter Henry. I stated that, Antonio Gates just looks so slow on the field. Like, he just looks like a snail moving through the field. Like, Hunter Henry is the better option for this offense. And I mean, it was good to see Hunter Henry still having relevance on the field, even though Antonio Gates was back for this game. But it's going to be frustrating. Every single week I get questions about the Chargers and who they should start and who they should sit and this and that. I'll almost always fade a Chargers player because there's a chance that he gets 2 points, even though there might be an upside for them to, get 100 yards and a touchdown.
Well, yeah, and it's funny you bring that up because, yeah, I mean, there's several cases of that. For example, the 2 receivers for the Chargers this week that went off were Travis Benjamin, 7 for 117 and a touchdown. Tyrell Williams, 5 for 117 and a touchdown. Excuse me, Benjamin did not have a touchdown. That went to Williams there. But like you said, last week it was Dontrell Inman, and then this week Inman has 1 catch for 3 yards. So
I told people that. People were asking me if he was a legitimate option to start. I'm like, I wouldn't even pick him up off the waiver wire. Like, he's not ownable.
Right. So Scott, I mean, any thought as to, is this like a Cardinal situation with the receivers where, hey, they're all pretty decent options, but there's not any consistency there, or is there anyone to rely on there?
Yeah, I don't know. It just feels like playing Russian roulette every week with these wide receivers. And then right now the tight ends a committee as well. I just have to give Rivers props. I know this was a fairly easy matchup. The Raiders defense is way worse than we had anticipated. He had 359 yards on 30 attempts and 4 touchdowns. That's fantastic given he's missing offensive linemen, Danny Woodhead, Keenan Allen, Stevie Johnson, Gates isn't 100%. Yeah, that's awesome. Good for you, Phillip Rivers.
Yeah.
All right, on the other side of the ball, Amari Cooper at long last had his breakout game. 6 receptions for 138 yards and a touchdown. It seemed, Mike, that the Raiders made extra sure that Cooper was a big part of the game plan. He led the team with 12 targets. No one else had more than 7.
Honestly, you will not find a happier person about Amari Cooper getting the stat line he did today. And honestly, if you watch the game, it could have been a lot bigger because he scored another touchdown that they said he stepped out on, but he was pushed out. And I don't even know how that worked out. There was another one where he was rolled out of bounds. Basically, Amari Cooper was everywhere in this matchup. And like I said, there wasn't going to be someone going to be happier about it because I put him in my locks of the week. My DFS article this week, and a lot of people were giving me a lot of crap saying it was Michael Crabtree, the best receiver in Oakland. I think it was just a matter of Amari Cooper finally not having to deal with opposing number 1 cornerback where Brandon Flowers and Jason Verrett were out for the Chargers in this game. So Amari Cooper got loose, and he showed you what he was made of today, and it made me happy to see it. But honestly, the even bigger story, Derek Carr, man, the guy has been playing lights out. He's our number 1 graded quarterback at PFF, and it's not even close. He's graded as 16.8. The next closest is 12, and that's Carson Wentz. So Derek Carr has been playing fantastic through the first 5 weeks.
Just like we all thought, the top 2 PFF quarterbacks through week 5, Carson Wentz and Derek Carr. So.
And Andrew Luck, number 3. What's up?
Yeah. All right, so Scott, let's leave on a sour note, shall we? The Raiders running game. Also a game of Russian roulette. So you had Latavius Murray not go this week, so it was left to Dwayne Washington and Jalen, don't call me Richard Richard. They, again, split carries literally down the middle. Richard had 8, Washington had 9. Neither one really went off, but it was interesting. They also split the work in the receiving game, too. Richard had 7 targets and 6 catches. Washington had 6 targets and 5 receptions. So, I mean, is Jack Del Rio just jerking with us at this point? I feel like he is. I feel like he's looking at the stat sheet and going, oh, crap, we got 2 receptions we're off for Washington. Get him out there.
Why would you give me this question? Why would you want to end the podcast on this? Yeah, this is a super annoying committee until we have more clarity, until a hot hand breaks out. Not really touching it despite running behind one of the best offensive lines in football. Instead, I'm gonna just ignore that question and talk about Michael Crabtree, aka
yes,
new
end it on
Decker.
a more positive note. End it on a happier note.
Please. He's the new Eric Decker. Yeah, sure, Amari Cooper went off, but Crabtree's not shot liver. He got a touchdown, and that marks his 13th touchdown in 16 games.
Holy crap!
Yeah, and I don't know. Did you guys watch that game? Did you watch the touchdown? I mean,
I did. It was a good catch.
It was. And again, if you're a 49er fan, you're like, gee, Michael Crabtree, you couldn't make that catch in the Super Bowl a couple years ago. That's fine. I'm not bitter. I've moved on, even though it was 3 years ago.
More as a 49ers fan.
Oof, yeah, and luckily they didn't play today, so I had a good day. Anyway, all right. So that will do it for this edition of the Fantasy Slant. For Mike Tagliere and Scott Barrett, we'll see you next time.